And we turn now to our next reading from the book of Ruth in chapter 3 and chapter 4, finishing off this beautiful story. Naomi, Ruth's mother-in-law, said to her, "Daughter, I must seek a home for you, where you may be happy. Now there is our kinsman Boaz, whose girls you were close to. He will be winnowing barley on the threshing floor tonight. So bathe, anoint yourself, dress up, go down to the threshing floor. But do not disclose yourself to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. When he lies down, note the place where he lies down. Go over and uncover his feet and lie down. He will tell you what you are to do." She replied, "I will do everything you tell me." So Boaz married Ruth. She became his wife, and he cohabited with her. The Lord let her conceive, and she bore a son. And the women said to Naomi, "Blessed be the Lord, who has not withheld a redeemer from you today. May his name be perpetuated in Israel. He will renew your life and sustain your old age, for he is born of your daughter-in-law, who loves you and is better to you than 7 sons." Naomi took the child and held it to her bosom. She became its foster mother. And the women neighbors gave him a name, saying, "A son is born to Naomi." And they named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, who was the father of David. The grass withers and the flower fades, but the word of the Lord lives forever. And this is the word of the Lord. All thanks be to God. Now, it's no mystery that life can be extremely harsh. The other day, I was watching a show with a discussion panel that involved these two guys up there. Carl Lentz, who is the pastor of Hillsong Church in New York, and Neil deGrasse Tyson, my absolute favorite astrophysicist. They got into a good conversation about religion and science. Differing perspectives coming together in a pleasant and respectful exchange, as it should be. Lentz is a believer who accepts science, and Tyson a scientist who is atheist. Now, I think of Tyson as kind of the ultimate doubting Thomas. When Jesus showed up in front of Thomas, Thomas didn't end up actually needing to touch Jesus' scars like he thought he was going to know that Jesus' resurrection was for real. Tyson, I think, would have needed to actually touch Jesus' scars. I mean, he's open to the idea of God, but simply can't bring himself to belief without empirical evidence, which, of course, is part of what makes him such a great scientist, always seeking that evidence. One argument that Tyson made to explain his disbelief is a very good one. Now, considering our understanding of how God is relentlessly out for the good of humanity, he described that there's just so much in the world and in the universe that's life-threatening. He said, anytime someone describes their understanding of God, it typically involves some kind of statement of benevolence or some kind of kindness. But going on, he said, I look out to the universe, and yes, it's filled with mysteries, but it's also filled with all manner of things that would just as soon have you dead. Like asteroid strikes and hurricanes and tornadoes and tsunamis and volcanoes and disease and pestilence. Now, instead of the more common disregard of science we hear so often from Christians, I really like how Pastor Lentz responded. He said, I think God created science. So for me, I don't think exploring any of this stuff is bad. I think it's going to lead you to the knowledge that something had to begin this. And there's something more. And the conversation continued from there. But I just wanted to focus on Tyson's description for a moment about all the things out there that are life-threatening. And I'm not out to refute that argument. Now, I could go through and talk about each one of these things, how they not only destroy, but they also give life. Like asteroids, they're thought to have brought water and other critical minerals and whatnot to Earth. Hurricanes, tornadoes, tsunamis, volcanoes stir up the soil and renew the Earth, and so on. Now, disease and pestilence are tougher to pick apart, as are a lot of other things that Tyson didn't mention. But all that isn't really the point anyway. I'm looking at this more from a point of agreement, that there really is an awful lot of stuff out there that would just as soon have us dead. An awful lot that is life-threatening, that is harsh, that's crippling, that brings hardship and suffering, that we have going against us in this journey we call life. Now, in a sense, these kinds of forces of the universe are exactly what made Naomi's circumstances so bitter. Naomi is a woman who really felt the crippling blows of life. Now, the book of Ruth, it's named after Ruth because of her incredible compassion, perseverance, and her mind-boggling commitment to Naomi. And in that regard, Ruth is a true hero and the hero of the story. This widowed foreigner who ultimately becomes the great-grandmother of King David and ancestor of Jesus himself. However, the story really isn't about her. This is Naomi's story, as we see today in the conclusion. Naomi is the one who experiences the biggest turnaround. She's the one who finds the greatest redemption in response to her hardships. It's Naomi who's seen as being renewed in her life and her faith after all that she's been through. She's the one celebrated as Ruth's baby enters the picture. And Ruth fades off into the background. Now, a quick rundown of the story. Naomi, remember, lost her husband and 2 sons. Her daughter-in-law, Ruth, vowed to stay with her through thick and thin. In chapter 2, Naomi finds work for Ruth in the fields of her extended family member, Boaz. Chapter 3, Naomi guides Ruth into a relationship with Boaz. In chapter 4, Ruth and Boaz marry and they have a son. And the women neighbors say it's Naomi. They say to Naomi, "Blessed be the Lord who has not withheld a redeemer from you today. May his name be perpetuated in Israel. He will renew your life and sustain your old age, for he is born of your daughter-in-law, who loves you and is better to you than 7 sons." Naomi then holds the child. She becomes his foster mother. The women declare that a son has been born to Naomi, and they name him Obed. Not sure how Ruth felt about Naomi becoming the boy's mother-in-law, or becoming the boy's foster mother, and having the neighbor women name him. But we don't get any reason here to believe that she had a problem with it, considering how interested she was in Naomi's well-being. Naomi was hit so hard from multiple angles, from famine, losing her husband and sons, being left a widow in a harshly patriarchal world. But as her life played out, God proved to be very active in her life, ultimately renewing her and sustaining her in her old age by inspiring Ruth to stay with her, by moving Boaz and others to be supportive, by providing new life in the form of a baby. It's good to know that a sense of renewal is somehow possible in these many different kinds of ways for those who are hit by the harshness of this world. In the gospel passage, we find Jesus teaching about scribes who'd been corrupted by money and power, and having to beware of their hypocritical ways, them teaching and praying long prayers for all to see, meanwhile devouring widows' houses. Against this backdrop of the corrupt scribes abusing widows, we then hear about a widow showing up to the temple, obviously living on extreme poverty, yet giving all that she has, amounting to a penny, as an offering in worship. This immense faith showing through. A woman who, having suffered greatly, losing her husband and dealing with the abuses of the authorities, living in utter poverty, somehow moves forward in her life and in her faith in a way that sets the example for every single one of us. In what ways did God move through her life to give her renewal and sustenance? Harsh circumstances of life are all around us, yet God provides ways for us to find renewal and to be sustained rather than to just die off. Easier said than done finding that stuff, I think, or recognizing it or embracing it when it does show up. I'm thinking right now of Austin and Sharisa, thinking of Lauren and Chuck, the parents of baby Braden, who just passed away. Talk about the crippling blows of life. Just like that, everything in life changes. Just like that, the life-threatening forces of creation strike. Somehow they have to carry on. And I think we got mention of one of the ways that God is working already for them, as they've found 6 different babies who will receive the organs from Braden, so that Braden will be providing new life in his passing. Somehow, the Lord gives and gives and gives to provide newness, to provide sustenance, especially in times that we need it most. Prayers go up to the Lord for strength and relief from suffering. Questions go up about how such terrible things could happen. But faith tells us that God will provide. That God will carry the family through this dark time, inspire loved ones to show compassion and commitment, to move loved ones to provide support, and somehow, some way, bring new life in whatever form it may be. We know God is a God who not only exists, but who does work relentlessly for the good of humanity, despite all those life-threatening, crippling forces out there. God hears the cries and the pleas of the suffering. God sides especially with those who've got all odds against them, who face the forces of life that would just as soon have them dead. How redemption will be provided in whatever case, I can't say. Renewal comes in more ways than can be imagined, but it definitely comes. Each of us in our situations are different. Each of our needs are different. Ways that God reaches out and works in our lives are different. But what we do know for sure is that God is at work for the good of each one of us and for all of us. No matter who, no matter what, no matter where, may the Lord provide. Relief from suffering. May the Lord provide strength and sustenance. May the Lord provide renewal and ultimately redemption. May it be so. Amen.